Originally released in Japan during 1990, North America and Europe in 1991, and the rest of the world in 92, the Game Gear was Sega's first handheld portable console, with a battery life of around 4 hours and a cartridge games library of around 390. Unfortunately, this one isn't working. So, let's open it up, fix what we need to, and apply some modern magic so we can experience ourselves this slice of retro handheld console history. Starting with this tamper-proof bolt, which I managed to remove with a standard 4mm socket, I progressed to the 4 Phillips screws on the rear shell and 2 additional screws in the battery compartments. Opening it up, we can see the motherboard at the top, which houses the rear of the LCD screen. We also note 3 integrated circuits, so IC1, which houses the Z80A CPU and the video processor. IC2 is 32K of high-speed pseudo-static RAM, and IC3 is 8K CMOS static RAM. And at the base we can see the sound board and the power board. And bringing that together, we can see in this block diagram IC1, IC2, IC3, the power board and the soundboard, which incidentally powers the mono speaker or stereo if you plug a jack into the phone port. The memory is arranged in cartridge slots labelled 0 through to 2, which is used to map the cartridge bank or banks depending upon the capacity of the cartridge. And finally, the mirrored RAM resides at the top of memory. Having removed the final connections, it was now time to perform an inspection of the motherboard and the sound and power boards. As expected, our inspection has identified a dielectric capacitor leak. This will be due not only just to age, but with known production quality issues with capacitors in the early 90s. This means we need to prepare our sound and power boards by removing all capacitors and cleaning the boards up where required. Carefully lifting the motherboard up to reveal the front and the LCD screen, we can see this unit is an 837-9130 and thus a VA1. But what does that mean? From what I can identify, there are 5 key different versions of the Game Gear, and this one is a second iteration which appears to have one less chip than the VA0. Further inspection of the motherboard has identified capacitor leakage, so let's remove the remainder of the capacitors and prepare the board for some new replacements. Having purchased a full capacitor kit, it came with full instructions for the power, sound and motherboard. So opening the capacitor bag up and preparing each capacitor, then applying flux to the existing capacitor points to provide a soldering point. Having been careful not to remove the traces, this is exactly what I did for C55. So holding the motherboard up to a light, I could see it was connected to R45. Then, having realised I'd accidentally set the soldering iron temperature far too high, having turned it down, I managed to solder one of the capacitor legs to the tiny resistor at R45. As a result, I was able to do a much better job on the right hand side of the motherboard to complete the sound, power and motherboard recap. Not the best of jobs, but definitely lesson learnt. As our Game Gear didn't come with battery covers, I downloaded this 3D print, printed them out, filed them down and performed a test fit. Perfect. Having sprayed the battery colours a near matching colour, I also downloaded, 3D printed and painted a Game Gear stand. For presentation, I prepared a game cartridge, and for completeness, a 3D printed cover for the extension port, used to connect two Game Gears for multiplayer. So the recap worked, but there are still problems with the screen. Having downloaded, 3D printed and painted this second stand to display a second Game Gear, I've also recapped as a benchmark. Now we have a working Game Gear. Let's review the cartridges we have and open them up using this tamper-proof socket set to give them a good clean, so we're able to showcase their title screens. The Game Gear also had a TV tuner interface. Unfortunately, in the UK, we no longer have an analog signal. So what else can we do? In an effort to increase Game Gear gameplay longevity, we need to look at alternative power solutions, such as this Powergrip from the early 90s, which contains 7 rechargeable batteries, which, as we can see, have seen better days. So, let's see if we can fabricate a modern day alternative. So to do this, we need to understand its power requirements, which we can see are 9 volts at 3 watts. As an estimate, the Game Gear consumes just over 300 milliamps per hour. And we already know as a benchmark that 6 AA batteries provide 9 volts and just over 1300 milliamps per hour. And if we divide that out, that's 4 hours battery life, which is about right. Checking the specification of this branded 9-volt battery, that it operates at 460 milliamps per hour, which means we should get 1 hour of gameplay from this battery. As we're looking for a rechargeable solution, I found this near equivalent 9-volt rechargeable battery which has 5,400 milliwatts per hour. So converting that, we've got 600 milliamps per hour, which should be around 1.75 hours. So let's give it a test. It's not working, and probably because it's a rechargeable battery and doesn't reach its 9-volt potential. But more on that later. So for now, let's clean up what we've got, load up the Game Gear with 6 batteries, install the Powergrip, so it's standalone on the desk, and play some Echo the Dolphin. It's now time to address that faulty LCD screen. So having purchased an LCD replacement kit, it was now time to remove, well, quite a lot. Having completed the less than comprehensive instructions and wired up the new LCD kit, it was time to do the smoke test. It doesn't work, which is a shame because this LCD screen also had a HDMI port which supported a larger screen. Having acquired this third Game Gear motherboard, which is an 837-7996, and we can tell it's a VA0 because it's got the additional integrated circuit on the left hand side. And this time I acquired the Magic Screen from RetroKai because the installation is a lot easier with a lot less work to do, and thus go wrong on the motherboard. So let's give this third board a try. But before we do, let's sort this replacement screen. So by using a flat plastic lever and score it under the plastic glass, and it should come off fairly easily. And then the mammoth task of cleaning off all the glue. I've been using rubbing alcohol, WD-40 and elbow grease. And whilst not forgetting to clean the inside, it should come up something like this. Having attempted to install the motherboard within the case, unfortunately there was a standoff in the way. So removing it using the soldering iron seemed to do the trick. Then removing the back adhesive pads and pressing it down onto the case to ensure a snug and tight fit. Not forgetting to locate the buttons, which interestingly are keyed, followed by installing the main board and securing it down, and finally locating the extension port cover before the big LCD reveal. Looping back to the power problem, I came across this USB powered cable, which is great, so I can plug it into the wall and power the Game Gear. But this doesn't address the mobile charging issue. Whereas this power bank with 10,000 milliamp hours may well do, given it may provide up to 30 hours of mobile play time. Given we've only got a few games, and I really wanted to experience some more from back in the day, as a result, I've managed to get this Flash Gear game cartridge, which houses 586 games on the micro SD card. So let's put it in the Game Gear and see what happens. So you're presented a menu that says GG for Game Gear and SMS for Sega Master System. But there's also a save directory, which would be where your save games are stored using this battery backup. So let's load one of my favourite games from back in the day. Yes, it's Marble Madness. And my favourite retro arcade, it has to be Outrun. And the Master System version, which I personally feel captures the essence of the original Outrun arcade. Given the compatibility issues, let's load up the fantastic emulator, Kega Fusion.